Everyone, and welcome to another episode of VIVE Influencers. Today we have a very special guest, Blitz, who has a very popular YouTube channel where he plays lots of games, a lot of VR games, a lot of other very exciting games, Among Us, lots of things in Minecraft. How are you doing today?
Doing good. I'm doing quite well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So why don't you tell us about yourself and your channel?
Sure. So I'm Blitz. I'm a professional engineer to begin with. I went to school to become an engineer. I did that for 9 years. And towards the end of that career, I started doing YouTube on the side. And I always thought I'd have two monitors open on my desk, and on my left monitor, I'd be doing my work. And on the right monitor, I'd be watching people play Minecraft or do other games. And I always thought, like, why don't I try to do that? Because I can be funny, I can play games, and I could try to figure out how to record it. So I did. And about a 3-year overlap. And then I resigned as an engineer and became a full-time content creator in, I think it was 2017, 2016 or 2017. I can't remember the exact date now, but about 4 years now I've been doing YouTube full-time. And I do a variety of games from mobile to old Flash games, the newest, some AAAs, VR, pretty much anything and everything that catches my eye.
How did you pick your first few games?
I just copied what other people were doing. And
Cool.
it seemed to work. The Yogscast, the old Yogscast channel, was one of those that were doing a lot of indie variety games. And there were so many in 2016, 2015, there were so many really amazing indie games that came out. And that was back when Steam was heavily curating and all that fun stuff. So there's a lot of really, really cool games that I just kind of caught on to, and my channel grew from surfing from one game to the next.
How do you balance basically making content that you feel like is trending, people want to see, versus just things you want to do, expressing yourself?
That's the hardest. Because if I were to play the games that I always wanted to play myself, I wouldn't. The market cap for those games is so much lower than a variety of games that I play now. So kind of understanding my audience, trying to figure out what they want to see, and then pulling in other games to that content too. I like to do a lot of times like cross games. If I find a sandbox game that I can add other content to and mix like Minecraft with something else that's popular and trending. So it's tough. It's a tough balance to make content that the audience is always going to be interested in.
Yeah. What was the beginning days like for starting your channel? And as you know, a lot of people want to be YouTubers, and majority of them don't get a big following, dozens or hundreds of people. How, at the beginning, how was it like? And, did you have big aspirations of your channel, or you just kind of want to do it for fun?
It was all for fun to begin with. And I did look at your profile too, and I saw you played a lot of the old Blizzard games. Diablo 3, you remember Diablo 3 when it came out and it had the real money auction house?
Yes.
So I made like $130 on that. And I was like, I can make money playing video games. And I tried finding other ways. So it was kind of cross, where I wanted to learn a new skill and have fun doing it. And then I moved from basically learning the skill into realizing that there could be a career there.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing with the people thinking making money from video games in general in esports. Like the money you made, $130 from playing a game, sounds like a lot, but if you consider the hourly time you put into it, an hourly wage, it's probably not that impressive.
Oh no, not at all. It was a lot of grinding to sell a few items. I did get one item that was like $75, but it was way below minimum wage for what I did, but it was fun. Like I was having fun playing a game. So why not make a little coin on the side?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, later on, there's more and more opportunities to actually make a living with gaming, whether it's creating content or competition, all that stuff. So it's nice that the industry became more mature at that point. What was the moment where you suddenly felt like, hey, this is catching on. This is probably going to be a big thing that's going to change your life when you're doing your YouTube?
I had about 400,000 subscribers at that point, and I would not recommend to anyone to do the path that I took. Working a full-time job, having a wife and a son at home, and trying to do YouTube on the side. I remember there was one week where I had literally 27 hours of sleep in 7 nights total. So it was averaging under 4 hours of sleep a night, and it was really bad. So my wife and I sat down and I said, just give me 6 months and let's see what happens at the end of 6 months. And my channel grew from 400,000 to, I believe, 1.2 million subscribers. And I changed the way that my videos were produced, went from straight let's play videos to more edited, highlighting multiple games rather than just doing long series of individual games. And at the end of that 6 months, they offered me a promotion at my job, my engineering job, to be a supervisor. And I sat down to schedule the interview with the boss. And I said, I'm going to decline this interview, and here's my 1 month resignation notice. And his face went just absolutely sheet white, lost all color. And I started doing YouTube full time.
Well, I will say that it's quite impressive that during those 6 months where you're trying to push your channel, you did such a good job at your work also that you had this promotion opportunity. So that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I had a perfect eval at the end of the year. And I know I was a good engineer, but I couldn't do both. And I started when I was young as well. So I still had a layover period where about 5 years where I wouldn't damage my career to leave the engineering so I could come back and still retire on time. So I just wanted to try it out, and I was kind of bored, so moved on from that.
What did you want to do when you were growing up?
It's a good question. I always thought of being an engineer. I always took the math and the science classes. I always loved it and enjoyed it. But as soon as I was done with my homework, I would play video games. So it kind of moved on from that, where I always just wanted to have fun and be creative and explore and build things. And now I do that digitally rather than physically.
Yep. And you mentioned your one of the big things was going from 400K subscribers to your 1.2, but obviously getting to 400,000 is already a very difficult achievement. Most people don't get there. So was there a time in the early days where you feel like, hey, this is actually going from just a fun hobby to it's going to be picking up to become a serious channel kind of thing, like a lot of people watch it?
I honestly never looked back and saw what I had. I never sat down and reflected on what was going on. I just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And then once I finally resigned my engineering job and sat down and looked back, I recognized what I was missing out on because I was overdoing too much. So yeah, I never recognized it. I saw the paychecks that were coming in, and it kind of dawned on me. That's why I even had the idea to quit. But there's always the uncertainty with online content creation. Like one day with cancel culture the way it is, or YouTube accidentally doing something, or a channel getting hacked, like it can cut your knees out from under you. And I think we kind of hit that with just globally this last year with the virus, how a lot of industries were absolutely gutted, and it changed how everything works. And surprisingly, this last year has been really good because people were stuck at home. So it's kind of changed the way I've thought of it, of YouTube not really going anywhere, and it's becoming more legitimate in a lot of industries now too.
Yeah, online entertainment is essential during times of crisis and COVID.
Right.
Yeah. What was your first experience using VR?
Oh man, I don't remember the first one. I remember the first time I ever heard of it. That's when I was a kid back, probably mid 90s. We went to a science museum, and there was a demonstration about VR. And it was like an old giant clunky headset, and they put it on a couple people and they walked around in basically a open sandbox. But later on, the first headset I got was HTC Vive, and there's a couple games that I played right away. I know one of them was Crazy Fishing VR. I always liked fishing, so I thought, let's go fishing in VR, and it was a lot of fun.
I saw some of your videos there.
Mm-hmm. My most popular video on my channel is Crazy Fishing.
Yeah, which is a little surprising sometimes. It's like, oh, like have people want to watch someone else play a fishing game.
Right. Yeah. So the old adage of like parents telling their kids, well, why are you playing a sports game? Like go out and play sports with your friends. Or then you can ask the dad why the dad is sitting down on the couch watching a soccer or football game instead of going out and doing that with his friends. But yeah, it's fun. Like VR is a totally different experience.
Yep. What excites you about 2022 for yourself and for the world in general?
Man, 2022.
Yeah,
I have a hard time looking.
Next year.
Yeah, I have a hard time looking. We're actually starting a few different projects here at the office. I've got a handful of people that work with me, starting up a bunch of different side things. We have a 3D printing channel that's starting next week. We're doing the shorts. YouTube's always finding some sort of new feature surprise that they're rolling out. So kind of just growing on what we have and then adding a few other side things to it. 3D printing's one, podcast is another, helping other people learn to do YouTube and kind of maybe a mentoring system. So still need to flesh that out in my head, but
this 3D printing as a new channel, is that a passion interest you have or one of the people you're working with?
Both. So I've always liked the idea of it. I mean, it's the new technology. You go from, digital online content to newspaper. The people below me in our office building was a radio station, and now their peak listenership is lower than my lowest time of viewership during the day. And I think that kind of works with 3D printing too, is you move from old systems into a new system, and then new technology is getting a lot more consumer friendly now. So 3D printing is just fun in general.
Yeah, I think 3D printing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gartner's hype cycle, but it has that cycle, same with VR. So there's things where it just got really, really hyped up and everyone is investing money into it. And then they have a term, I think it's called the trough of disillusion, when it's like, oh, it's like overinvested. It's not solving all our problems yet. It's just a hype buzzword. And then it drops to the bottom and then it slowly elevates back again. Something of enlightenment. It's just like people are actually figuring out the real use cases and it's actually growing at a more sustainable rate. And I think, 3D printer back in the day, just like VR, right, had its big hype moment and then it's like, hey, maybe it's not ready yet. And now it's building that. So I haven't looked at a 3D printer for a while. Are there any really exciting things that happened that's been developed in the last 3 years?
Yeah, their medical technologies is going really strong in it. Just heard recently that they're CT scanning like hip joints and then getting a build of it and then 3D printing out of titanium the new hip sockets and then using that as a transplant. So it's an exact model of the person's hip bone rather than just trying to come up with something that works. But I mean, even for consumer level stuff, they've made wood filament now, so you can make wooden sculptures. And they're starting to get into dissolvable, so you can create things that dissolve. So there's all sorts of really interesting technologies that are blossoming from it.
Do you see
it's fun to explore
a intersection between 3D printing and VR?
Oh, that'd be interesting. I think the problem with that is the time with VR, like you're in it. It's real time. With 3D printing, some of the prints take 13, 14, 100 hours to complete, and watching something for that long might not be good. But there are things like even just controller stands, headset stands that you can build, which help out a lot, because there's not really that many products coming out from the hardware companies that are for storage. So that's kind of one way to do it.
Yeah, I think potentially in the long term, like 10, 20 years out, we're talking about VR connected to the metaverse, NFT
Hmm.
blockchain, and potentially that has an opportunity to say, hey, when you have this NFT, it gives you exclusive right to print something out via your 3D printer.
Right.
Um, and you can obviously license that so other people can print it out, but you don't
Hmm.
own it. So I think there's some kind of interesting way where it can all connect together. The other thing
Yeah.
is, um, what blows my mind is that I feel like humans are still so behind on material science. You know, when we look at a spider, right? And I think most people know that spiders, their silk is supposedly stronger than steel, right? But
Right.
what they don't think about as often is these spiders, they just eat insects, right? They just consume
Yeah.
protein and they just spin out the steel material at mass every day at room temperature, right?
Right.
It's like we have a machine and we just throw chicken in it and then suddenly like elastic steel comes out every day very quickly.
Huh.
And you know, we are not even close to understanding how to create something like that. You know,
Right.
we can't even really effectively create, you know, something where it absorbs sunlight, water, and then
Hmm.
produces and CO2 and produces oxygen, right? That's not even something we can effectively make. So I
I
really
do think
think
it is interesting how much closer to it the understanding has become now, though. Rather than you think like even 100 years ago, how much difference in technology on these things. Like there was hardly running water and electricity in a lot of areas, and how far we've advanced as a society since then. So adding things like the VR and 3D printing to it, and even using genetically modifying. I've heard goats to produce spider silk within their milk. Like there's some crazy cool things that are coming up.
yeah. And I'm just wondering if, you know, 3D printing taking dozens of hours to print something will, uh, will it be massively better than that in the next 5, 8 years, or we anticipate it to still be pretty slow.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Let's go back to your channel. So
Cool.
were there days that you just felt extremely discouraged and just wondering like why are you still doing this, or if you should keep doing it, and if there are those days, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. When I had about 5,000 subscribers, I was ready to quit.
Mm,
I was ready to throw in the towel and say it's not worth it. It's the market's oversaturated, and you got to remember this was like 2015. Market's oversaturated. There's too many channels. YouTube's never going anywhere, and I got a comment um, from somebody that, and I don't even remember their name now, but it was basically like, "Hey, I love your videos. Just keep it up." Just something that I get 200 times a day now, but something about that back when I was just early on and starting, how much different it felt. So that was one time there, and with the overwork and exhaustion um, in that final overlap between engineering and YouTube, there were times there where it was very difficult to get up and go to my day job to come home to do my night job. So there were a couple times. There's also just kind of recently where you kind of get into a lull where there's no interesting games coming out and nothing too exciting to play. And it's like, man, I'm going to go find, Minecraft mod number 700 and play it. Or, those are always fun, but it's not really something you could sit down and sink hours and hours into to actually play. So there is a difference between creating content you enjoy and creating content for your audience to enjoy.
yeah,
And I can pretty much enjoy any game I can play. So,
makes sense. That day that you quit your job so you can focus
mhm.
on your channel, how did that feel? And where you're like, all right, now I'm just gonna every day for the next, I'm just on fire on my YouTube site, or you're like, hey, I'm gonna take a small break and just go out and relax. Like, how did
it took
how that experience?
it took 3 months of of recovery, I guess, mental health recovery. I was getting extreme nightmares at night of kids that would come up to me like in an interrogation chair, and a kid would just materialize and say, "Your channel's nothing. You're gonna die." I was like, eh. But yeah, after about 3 months, it turned around and it started to get into the groove, and it was a lot of learning. even just editing. I have zero background in audio and visuals, thumbnail creation, making unique titles, and all sorts of things. There's so many things to learn. But once you get in a routine of it and looking back to see what's worked before and what's working for other people, then it turns out pretty good.
You haven't learned those skills prior to quitting your job?
Yeah, somewhat. And I mean, it was learning over time. And I did take some graphic design in high school, but nothing formally.
I see. So before that, I mean, again, building to 1.2 million subscribers, right? That was, it's, you know, people would assume you already mastered a lot of those technical things, but it sounds like you did share good content. And then afterwards, you're like, hey, I'm a full-time pro. I really got to pick up these things. And then you took 3 months to really hone the program.
I've got, where is it? Oh, right behind me here. My first microphone I still have behind me. And that's like it's all I could afford. It was like a $35 microphone. And I swear it could pick up a mosquito buzzing from a mile away. It picks up everything. And you can go back and listen to my old videos back then and how bad the audio quality is, but I didn't know any different. I didn't register it. I didn't think of it. And that's the first thing I did was bought this new mic. So yeah, there was a lot of learning. And I think if you sit down and you look at every video as a learning experience, you look at the analytics, you see where people stopped watching it, you look at what the click-through rate was. Maybe the topic of the video was wrong, or maybe it was really, really right. And if you keep moving forward rather than sitting back and looking at what you had in the past, just keep growing and constantly getting better at what you're doing. So yeah, that's tough. It is hard when you have zero experience doing it, but the only way you get experience is by continuing to do it.
Yep. You mentioned the, you know, when things were down and one positive comment just really lift up your spirit and was the fuel to push you forward. How do you deal with negative and troll comments, especially in the early days? Because as you know, YouTube is this unfiltered, anonymous place where just people just manifest all the worst parts about themselves. And like, so how do you deal with those? And early on when people just say mean things, and of course now you probably deal with it in a much better way.
Right. Early on, I found the YouTube comment filter and I just started putting words in there. So anytime someone said, you're copying such and such channel, I would just add the name of that channel to my filter. So I would never see it. I've got something like 100,000 comments that are blocked right now. I could pull up the analytics and there's well over 100,000 comments that I've never read, and they're toxic and they're full of cursing and spam comments that get past YouTube's automatic filters. So that's the first way I did it. And just doing that, and also recognizing that the people behind the comments, like you're producing free content, like they aren't paying for it. You don't owe them anything, but you're still trying to entertain them. So the combination of recognizing that you don't know this person and they don't know who you are, plus banning all of the bad words really helped out.
Yeah, that's a very good tip. Just utilizing a function of YouTube to just do it, and then it's the mental trick.
I'll be honest too. One of my favorite things to do is banning someone. I love it. There's toxic comment. I click down and hide that user. They can make all the comments they want to, and they will never know. They'll see their comment on there, but they will never know that you didn't read it. It's just a guilty pleasure.
So they will see their own comment, but no one else will see their comment?
Right. Or, yep. You hide their comment. So
they live in their own little bubble of them being a troll, but it's like an illusion.
Yep. It's fun. There's just something very satisfying about sitting back and knowing that they can vent all they want to in their own little echo chamber.
Well, I would think this imaginary scenario that's more satisfying is they do this trolling for like years and years and years. And then one day they finally realize that no one ever saw any of it, and they just wasted such a big passion part of their lives.
I see on other social media too, where people will come in and be like, YouTube is suppressing the comments on this video. And really, like, it's not suppressing comments at all. There's just probably caught in the automatic filters because you're being toxic. So I think it's funny.
Yeah. And of course, their toxic comments get filtered, so they get upset and they could go somewhere else to be toxic. Like, look how bad this thing is. It's all about blocking things out. Well, let's move on some more of the positive stuff. So what would you say is the most exciting highlight moment in your YouTube career? That moment where it's like just happy for so long, jumping for joy.
You know, there's one of the PR people that works for kind of a AA indie studio out of London. And I've met them. It's one of my favorite studios to work with. They're great. They make great games. And his son is autistic. And I met him at, I forget why I was in London. No, it was E3. They were in E3 in LA. And he's like, hey, I bought one of your shirts. I want you to sign it so my son can have it. And it was like this thing where, you know, we make this content, we recognize it from behind the scenes, and his son couldn't even wear the shirt because of the way it felt on his body, but he just wanted my logo on a shirt signed by me. And then it's one of his most cherished possessions. So I think that's cool. I get a lot of emails too from fans thanking me, more personal stuff. That's why I have like a lot of the fan mail behind me here of things that people have made for me. Just remind me that, you know, I really do. You could have a really bad day, and then at the end of the day, you can still go and try to escape watching my videos. And I know it's small and it might sound cheesy, but it's kind of nice that, you know, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, like the videos will always be there for you to watch. So
yeah, bringing joy in people's life. I mean, that's what people work so hard to do, right? Find happiness and joy. So
right,
you know, YouTube is and videos is a pretty reliable way and easy way to just bring some more delight in your day.
Yep.
Yeah. What's something that you are proud of in your life that isn't obvious to others?
It's a tough one. I mean, my family, obviously. I got a beautiful wife and 2 great kids. Today is actually my son's last day of kindergarten, so that's kind of cool. It's amazing to see like the family unit growing up together and how great the kids are, and just the ups and downs in the family. I guess that's one of my proudest things.
Great. I have twin daughters, Symphony and Harmony. And they're
that's cool.
They're 3.5 now, and so they're already debating me on so many things. I have to really watch my logic when I talk to them. I have to be consistent. Like, they'll catch me if I'm saying something inconsistent too. Something I said a few days ago. So it's
fun. Like, my kids they're 6 and 3, and they're complete polar opposites. My son is passive and bright, like you can tell he's a thinker, and my daughter is super aggressive, and she'll, one of her favorite things to do now, she'll run up to you and just grab onto my neck and say, "Daddy, I'm not gonna stop unhugging you." And she will latch on for like 15 minutes straight. You just have to walk around with her.
And she's 3.
Yep.
That's a lot of persistence for, you know, they'll say like, "I'll never do something," but then after a minute they'll give up. But
no, she'll hang on for 15-20 minutes, just not letting go.
Wow.
So that's great.
Sounds like as long as she set her mind on something, she's got a path of success in front of her.
She's very driven.
What's a piece of content that you feel very proud of, and you thought it was great when you're making it, but then it wasn't as appreciated as you hoped it would be, that you just want people to look at it more?
Yeah, I think the coolest project we've been in is this one, the Caterpillar video. That's the channel trailer. It's Caterpillar flew me out and my editor videographer to Illinois, and we played Pac-Man with real skid steer loaders that were remote control, 6,500 pound machines that we had remote control over, in a 250 foot by 250 foot Pac-Man board. and it's gotten good reception. But it's always like the proud moment where you just want to see a couple more people watch it. So actually, that was the video that kind of legitimized my job to family members, where they finally recognized that it's, it's something sustainable.
If Caterpillar likes your channel, then of course you have a good channel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, where do you think VR will be in 10 years?
You know, there's a lot where I see VR going is more of the experiences and less of the hardware side. I think we're kind of in a stage now where there's been a lot of really, really good indie games that have come out. We had Boneworks last year. And of course, Half-Life Alyx, that really changed the whole landscape of it. And then Oculus is working on a lot of the big experiences too. And I really think that's where it goes. I did a video for the Climb 2 at a local climbing wall where I climbed the wall and integrated that into the video playing the game. And if we have more experiences like that, where we can take real world events and bring them to people who can't really get into that position. Like I don't expect my grandma to be up 1,500 feet onto the side of a mountain climbing it, but putting her in VR and having her go through the same motions and experiencing something that she would never have been able to do in her life. And that's where I see VR going in the future. And you can even do that with educational settings and other things too, where you're connecting people with dreams that they never knew that they had that can be realized in a virtual world. So
Speaking of which, for people who have elderly family members who don't really know much about VR, and let's say you have like 3 to 4 minutes or less to just say, hey, put this on and be wowed and amazed, what would you think is the best content for those 3-4 minutes?
Gorn, the gladiator arena game. Like it puts you into a completely fictional world with over the top gladiator battles, and I've put my own family members in there. I put my mother-in-law in there and watched her get annihilated by another gladiator, and just that experience, like, it shows how cool VR really is. But yeah, Gorn is the one Gorn and Beat Saber are the two that I usually put people into if they're testing it out.
Do you think your mother-in-law being defeated so brutally would be like, wow, this is amazing, I want to do VR more, or she'll feel like, wow, that was traumatizing, maybe I should stop?
Yeah, both. She enjoyed it. She could see the draw of it and how interesting it was. My wife, if she plays, she goes into Beat Saber all the time, and that's a really good one too. Of, you always have that feeling in the progression of wanting to get better and better and better at it, and the songs are catchy and fun. And yeah, those are the two that usually put people in.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up soon. Last question for you: what are some top unexpected lessons you have acquired in the past 3 years? Things that you didn't expect that you would learn going into it. Could be 3 to 5 years. Could be 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for, I guess, my business, and if you look at YouTube as a business rather than a hobby, that'd be one of the things, is recognizing that it's an actual career, and then you can have a successful career doing it. Right here in my office, we've got 4 employees, and those are other unexpected things of having to understand taxes and payroll and accounting. And there's a lot more to it than just recording a video and scheduling it, like keeping track of receipts and invoices and making sure there's money in the bank account. So that's the whole side. And I think the other one too is, I heard a stat lately that was something like 30% of all middle schoolers, their career hasn't even been created yet.
Mm.
And I know you work a lot with the gamification, and I remember when that was starting to first become popular, how um, we have a lot of things right now that are so cutting edge and so new that another 10 years, like those new things now are going to be old. You think, I remember back when Facebook started when I was a freshman in college, and now, you know, it's more of for middle-aged people to use rather than teenagers and college kids. So um, I think that's another lesson I've learned, is to kind of keep track of what's going on in the future. And it's not too late to make a career change if you're going to work hard and take care of it, and if you know what you're doing. But also recognizing that it might not work out, and always having a backup plan too.
Yeah, I do think that to the younger generation, Facebook is for us like the yellow
Right.
page phone book, right? It's just
Right.
how grown-ups keep in touch, and
Yeah.
it's useful, but it's not that interesting.
Like
And
we had to have a .edu email address just to sign up for Facebook.
yeah, I
Like it
remember
was
that.
invite only at the time. And
Yeah, I
so,
was at UCLA 2004,
mhm,
and that's we did have to have EDU. And I remember when it opened up to every school, everyone was rushing in
right.
because of that scarcity. Like you're not allowed, now you're allowed, and everyone wanted to go.
Yep.
Yeah, but people ask me if I majored in gamification, and I was talking about, no, there's no such field when I started. Right now,
Yep.
some schools have it, and they're using my book as either textbook or supporting text.
That's
But
great.
back then it was just a passion for games and thinking about how games could make the real world better. Learn from
Hmm.
design, and so, like you said, a lot of real careers out there
Yep.
aren't created and might not even be imagined at this point. And I
Right.
think that goes also to a previous point you made that's very interesting, which is, you talk about the YouTube where you feel like, oh, there's so many channels saturated, right? And I feel like
Hmm.
there's so many things people feel like is saturated, everyone's doing it, but then there's still that opportunity. If you come out, you have good content, it's unique, you're passionate about it, you're persistent, you still stand out. I mean, when Instagram
Right.
became big and sold, I was surprised because like people have been doing photo apps and
Hmm.
websites for, I feel like that's a fully saturated field, right? And then you have a
Right.
company, 12 people came out and just did this thing and sold for $1 billion. It's like, hey, if you do a better job than everyone else, nothing's saturated, it seems.
There's a book kind of in that same sphere that you're in called Outliers by
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm Gladwell, I think it is.
Gladwell, yep.
Yeah. And they forced me to read that as part of the leadership development program at my engineering job. And I looked at it and I said, if I'm going to become an outlier here in this company, I'm going to have 20 hours extra work a week for a 3 to 5% raise. And that's kind of that same time where I was like, I just made $170 selling armor on Diablo 3. Why don't I try to become an outlier in a different area? And that's what I did. And I think my channel is kind of an outlier. It's one of the, like, I play a lot of indie variety games, and my channel is one of the top in that market. So that's pretty cool. Like,
Do you,
actually,
do indie games specifically go to you and say, hey, we know you like indie games and we have one,
yeah,
would you be interested?
I get about 30 requests a day.
Not 30 per day, quite a bit.
Yeah.
And how do you pick
So,
and choose between those 30 per day?
title and the topic. Actually, a lot of comes down to the camera angle too, where some games just can't be presented. They might be amazingly fun to play, but having to understand what my audience wants and having a good feeling of that now after doing it for a long time, 7 years. So yeah, it's tough because you see the work and the effort that these people put into the game that they make, and it just doesn't work for me. So, and I know
And
how much publicity can come from one video to a game as well, but you can't play them all.
well, even if you get to 30, even just evaluating them, 2 minutes
Yeah.
per game is an hour gone from your workday. So
A lot of times now I can even tell what the game is about just by reading the title of the email. So
become an
yeah, if it's
expert at this, at filtering out indie games.
It's weird. That's a weird skill.
Great. So I think we're going to wrap up here. Is there anything else you want to conclude on, just to share with the audience? You feel free to plug anything you'd like.
Yeah, I guess you can check out my channel. Just search for Blitz on there. We're also on the About page. You can see the different links, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram's growing too. We are starting out with the podcast called The Creative Mode coming up here pretty soon. And then the 3D channel, 3D printing channel is Blitz Works. You can all find that on my About page, or get to Twitter. It's all on there too.
Great. Thanks a lot for your time. And I look forward to seeing a lot of the great content you will make in the future. See you later.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.